At the end of March, the CARES Act was passed and signed into law. This was a massive piece of legislation that was passed due to COVID. The legislation provided many changes, but it impacted retirees, retirement income scenarios and income strategies, IRAs, and qualified retirement plans like 401ks. One of the major impacts was in reference to required minimum distributions. Now, the Secure Act, which was passed in the latter part of last year and went into effect January 1st, changed required minimum distributions from the standpoint of changing the confusing period of when you needed to start your required minimum distributions from 70 and a half. It changed it to age 72. Of course, this did not change any of the rules for somebody that was already taking required minimum distributions. Now, the CARES Act once again changed required minimum distributions rule in March. A provision of the CARES Act suspends actually all required minimum distributions, which means you don't have to take it this year. These accounts include 401ks, inherited IRAs, 403bs, and those types of accounts. Now, with the market volatility the way it has been and the uncertainty, any retiree who is taking required minimum distributions and their accounts are in the market has seen declines in their accounts. And it's usually not a good time, especially in retirement, to be taking out money from declining accounts. So this is what happens. If you already took required minimum distributions, what should you do? What can you do? Here are your choices. The first choice is, obviously, you can keep it. If you need the money to live on, you obviously get to keep your required minimum distribution. You pay the tax and you move on, and you get to spend the money however you want. The second provision is that you can return it or repay your entire distributions back to yourself or to your account. If you received, and this is how it works, if you received your required minimum distribution, it's possible that you can give it back, and we can actually expect some additional guidance with the IRS, as some of these, there's some little details around it that will probably get resolved through the end of the year. But however, there is a provision actually in the law that is what's called a rollover, a 60-day rollover. And what you can do is pay it back to yourself under this provision. Now, a 60-day rollover is actually a permanent rule in the books. And what it allows you to do is take money from one retirement account and actually within 60 days receive that money and transfer it or roll it over into another retirement account. Now, there are some restrictions to this, and especially when it comes to IRA to IRA, they only allow you one every 12 months. So under the 60-day rollover rule, if you took a distribution for required minimum distribution purposes after February 1st, what happens is that you have until July 15th to complete the 60-day rollover, provided, though, that you have not completed another 60-day rollover in the past year when we're dealing with IRAs. Now, this rollover extension does not apply to inherited IRAs. Inherited IRAs are IRAs that you inherit from a non-spouse. If you were affected by COVID, and the definition of being affected by COVID is very, very broad, you may actually have more than the 60-day rollover provision to move those funds to another account. However, again, there's additional guidance probably coming out throughout the year on this, on how you can do it from the IRS. The third, and it's probably my absolute favorite, because as many of you know, I do not like taxes, and I look for a variety of different ways, if possible, to either minimize or zero out your taxes, especially from retirement plans. Now, the third option is to convert it to a Roth. If you took your required minimum distribution, convert it to a Roth. Normally, your required minimum distribution cannot be converted into a Roth IRA, but since this year the required minimum distribution rules have been waived due to the CARES Act, you can actually take your distribution from your IRA or 401k and convert it into a Roth IRA. I love this rule. Okay, I love this possibility of doing this because number one, it's a great benefit that you have from converting when the markets and your market value is low. Okay, so your account value has dropped, which means that any future gains that you convert into a Roth IRA is going to accumulate tax-free. The other great opportunity here is that the amounts converted will forever be erased out of your traditional IRA, and therefore you have no required minimum distributions rules on that money that moved from your traditional IRA to a Roth. And third is that the Roth funds will pass on to your beneficiaries tax-free. All right, so I love the Roth IRA kind of pseudo conversion. The fourth benefit, which is actually a great benefit, is you get a tax break. All right, if you took your required minimum distributions, or you waived your required minimum distribution, you can still use your IRA to give to charity. Okay. Now, what happens is if some people are like this, they receive their required minimum distribution, they take it as income, it's taxable to them, and then they turn around and give that income to charity. That's the worst way to do it. What you need to be doing is what's called a qualified charitable distribution. And what happens is that the required minimum distribution amount comes out of your IRA, bypasses you altogether, so it doesn't even count as income and goes directly to charity. So if you would like to continue giving to charity, okay, this is a very beneficial and advantageous way to do it using what's called the qualified charitable distribution. And it's probably a rule. It's been around for a few years, and I don't think it's used as much as it should, but it's extremely beneficial. Now, bottom line is that RMDs for 2020 are waived. You do not have to take your RMD for 2020. However, like everything else, that if you plan right, you can use these opportunities to leverage and actually put yourself and take advantage of some planning opportunities, especially if it is to, from the standpoint of taxes in the future, from the standpoint of additional income in the future, from the standpoint of better investments in the future. So this is a great opportunity to take a look at this part of the CARE Acts and see how it works for you. So with that, I'll see you next time on Financial QB TV.